What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, August 24th, 2020, start of a brand new week of insanity here. We've got a lot to talk about today, and as usual, I'm going to talk about news until I run out of news, at which point we'll open the phone lines for your comments, questions, observations, and opinions. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and let's get right on into it. Obviously, keeping an eye on these two tropical depressions. Actually, one of them is back up to being a hurricane. And tropical storm Laura and Marco. Marco appears to be weakening. Laura is strengthening. They're saying it's probably going to be a Cat 1 hurricane if it isn't already. And these storms are basically going to hit pretty much the same area along the Gulf Coast rather. And Laura is going to move north into Texas later this week and be up over Indiana toward Friday evening. So we'll see what happens with that and how much the rain is going to affect our broadcast. But it is the first time they've had two hurricanes in the Gulf at the same time in documented history. So they're waiting to see exactly how they interact. Meanwhile, out in California, wildfires have covered 1 million acres in a week. Storms expected to fan flames. Then you've got, of course, that big storm that went through Iowa and destroyed something like 13 million acres of crops. Boy, all of a sudden I'm feeling like the United States is getting whooped on, big time. What did we do? Well, we did a lot of things, actually. Our government did a lot of things, actually, here. All right, this is the start of the Republican National Convention. It was gavelled into order earlier today. They've held the roll call of the states, kind of a study in foregone conclusions. Donald Trump is now officially the nominee for president for 2020's election. And Trump was complaining that cable news didn't cover the roll call of states during the daytime instead of prime time. Apparently, MyPillow co-founder Mike Lindell was among the stars. And frankly, I'm not surprised they pulled away and talked over it. It's kind of repetitive and boring. It's the state representative saying our state was the home of this and our state invented, toilet paper rolls and our state invented this and that, and a little bit of aggrandizement. But, ultimately, of course, Donald Trump was nominated to run in November for president here. And Trump later told the delegates the roll call was a big deal. Of course, I understand why Donald Trump may have been a little bit sensitive to the issue. North Carolina is a battleground state. And as a matter of fact, Trump, in addition to speaking at the convention, is taking a tour of the state right now. And he's talking about COVID food relief right now. Okay, you've probably been seeing all over the corporate media how there are all these polls showing Biden's ahead by so many points and Biden's here, Biden's there. And there's a story coming out of Investment Watch blog that's blown the whistle on this. The polls are oversampling Democrats. And they specifically point to one up in Pennsylvania that showed Biden up by 4 points. They polled 47 Democrats for every 39 Republicans, and independents 12%. So they're going to more Democrats than Republicans. So of course there's going to be a built-in bias toward Biden here. CNN is editing videos to try and make Donald Trump look more orange. They're out there with that orange man bad. And also CNN has announced they're going to fact check the Republican National Committee, something they didn't do on the Democratic National Convention, but they're going to do it for the Republican Convention. All right, Daniel Shapiro, President Obama's former ambassador to Israel, has been all over the Democratic Party's discussion of Israel policy. As a member of the platform committee, he helped shut down any language about cutting or even conditioning aid to Israel over human rights violations or about the occupation. And afterwards, Shapiro was the lead spokesperson for the Biden effort, spinning the platform as critical of both sides. Shapiro is a regular speaker at J Street and other Zionist organizations, explaining the strength of the U.S.-Israel relationship and why it's in the American interest. He often writes political opinion pieces. He is now actively promoting Joe Biden among American Jews and would surely have a top foreign policy role if Biden wins in November. He also lives in Tel Aviv. Okay, there's been another officer-involved shooting of a black suspect. And you've probably seen the video. It's been all over corporate media. This is up in Kenosha, Washington. And apparently police were responding to a domestic disturbance call. And there was a gentleman trying to break the fight up. But it turns out that gentleman had wants and warrants on him. So the police tried to detain him. He tried to get in his car and drive away with his kids in the back of the car. And the cops apparently shot him 7 times. And amazingly enough, he's still alive. He's in the hospital in serious condition. But this triggered riots and protests all over Kenosha. They burned up a car dealership, which actually had a Black Lives Matter sign right next to it. So apparently they attacked a courthouse and threw Molotov cocktails at officers. Rioters broke into the local courthouse, started a fire on the ground floor. Looting has been reported in the area. So a Kenosha riot live streamer urges violent arsonists and looters to go raid some white-owned businesses. The streamer was upset that they were burning a car dealership, not because they were destroying a business, but because the business had a Black Lives Matter sign nearby. Apparently, at one point, protesters armed with rifles faced off against the police APC in Kenosha after the latest police shooting. They basically shut down the street and forced the APC to halt. At one point, an officer was seen opening the hatch on the roof and throwing a tear gas grenade to disperse the crowd. Extremists destroy family-owned business during Denver riot. Never seen anything like this. I mean, the whole country's on fire right now. Violent rioters dressed in black and carrying an assortment of blunt weapons attacked numerous businesses and started fires in Denver on Saturday night, causing an extensive amount of damage. Another New York City war zone weekend, over 30 shot, many of them bystanders, in violence reminiscent of the 1980s. And apparently over a 3-day period from August 13th through 15th, a whopping 49 people were shot, which was 5 times more than the 8 who were shot during the same 72 hours last year. Tragically, the trend appears not to be some aberration, but signals the city is fast becoming a war zone now, with another deadly subsequent weekend. This brings New York City to more than 1,000 total shooting incidents across the year to date, already double all of last year, and the summer's not even over. A summer which ironically has witnessed a supposed heightened consciousness and awareness of police shootings of Black Americans, given the ongoing George Floyd and Black Lives Matter protests. Okay. Portland. Black Lives Matter revolutionaries bring the guillotine to the suburbs where they burn American flags, fling poo, and demand shelter. Apparently, they executed a stuffed toy bear with the guillotine. But see, here's the important part. They're now in the suburbs. They're going into the suburb areas. Chicago activists threaten city's residents. We have demands. Listen to us or you can get ran over. We have demands. Listen to us or you can get ran over. Story coming out of stationgossip.com. Black professors demand abolition of white mainstream English for Black linguistic justice. In other words, in order to not be racist, we have to start talking like the ghetto people talk. Amazing. Not surprisingly, gun and ammo sales surge as America transforms into a violent mess. Purchasing a gun is difficult these days, especially since demand is soaring, as concerned Americans are arming up as the country transforms into a violent mess. By the way, remember the McCloskeys, the couple that defended their home with guns? They're going to be featured speakers at tonight's Republican National Convention, talking about the Second Amendment, the right to defend your home against rioters and looters. Readers have already been briefed on multiple occasions of the developing ammo shortage this year. Fears of a nationwide 9mm ammo shortage spark panic hoarding. Surging gun sales trigger second ammo shortage of the year, and so forth and so on. So if you are a home protection enthusiast, I guess is a good way to put it, you might want to think about getting stocked up. Okay, Tennessee has had enough, imposes a law that will crack down on riotous protesters. Apparently, they passed legislation to basically increase the jail time for rioters and we're talking violent rioters. We're not talking peaceful protests here. And I know the Democratic talking point is that they're mostly peaceful. Well, yeah, you can have 100 people there and only one with a gas can and a Molotov cocktail, but you still have one there with a gas can and a Molotov cocktail. Turning to the international news, the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Stephen Biegun is set to meet with Belarus opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya in Lithuania on Monday. Since the August 9th presidential election in Belarus, the U.S. and EU have rejected the results and called for a fresh round. Tikhanovskaya is the main Belarus opposition leader who fled to Lithuania shortly after the vote, citing fear of arrest. Official results of the August 9th election gave the incumbent president, Lukashenko, about 80% of the votes and about 10% to Tikhanovskaya. Luka's opposition says the vote was rigged and therefore illegitimate. Protests for new elections continue in Belarus, with tens of thousands marching in Minsk on Sunday. The visit from Biegun, who's second only to Mike Pompeo in the State Department, shows the high level of U.S. support for the opposition in Belarus. Biegun will stop in Lithuania on his way to Moscow. Obviously, the geopolitical agenda is very obvious. The United States wants Belarus in the Western sphere of influence. Putin wants Belarus in the Russian sphere of influence. Now, Lukashenko orders the military to react without warning if NATO forces violate the western border, issuing what's essentially a shoot-to-kill order. Lukashenko said on Saturday, "There won't be a warning, we warn them. If they violate the state border, we react without warning." Meanwhile, NATO is denying there's a troop buildup on Belarus border. Now, since the August 9th presidential election, Lukashenko has claimed NATO is building up troops on Belarus border and is planning to oust him by force. Lukashenko made the claim again on Saturday when he was inspecting his own troops in Grodno, a city near Belarus border with Poland. Lukashenko ordered his military to take stringent measures to protect the territorial integrity of Belarus. The president said NATO troops in neighboring Poland and Lithuania were seriously stirring near their borders. NATO has repeatedly denied Lukashenko's accusations of a NATO buildup on Belarus border and did so again after his latest comments. As we have already made clear, NATO poses no threat to Belarus or any other country and has no military buildup in the region, the alliance said in a statement. Poland and Lithuania have also denied Lukashenko's claims. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Navalny, the guy who was supposedly poisoned last week, and apparently it's coming on out he may not have been poisoned. The accusation that he was poisoned, and by implication by Putin, was done without any evidence whatsoever. The hospital in Omsk said that Navalny had experienced severe hypoglycemia or diabetic shock. The head physician of the Omsk Emergency Hospital, Alexander Murakovsky, said that Alexei Navalny's condition was caused by a sharp drop in blood sugar. Now, apparently, he's in Germany now under treatment, and they're taking care of him there. Meanwhile, fearing a sharp decline in his approval rating, especially in view of a looming economic crisis, Turkey's strongman President Erdogan appears to be chasing new wars with real or imaginary enemies. And that's a very, very dangerous situation when you have a world leader, or the leader of a nation rather, who sees starting a war with somebody as their best option to retain power and control. We've seen it in this country too. We saw it, in crash of 1907, World War I, crash of 1929, World War II, crash of 2008, and we're on the doorstep again. Meanwhile, Mike Pompeo is out there rebuking the allies who opposed the snapback sanctions on Iran. And apparently, pardon me, members of the UN Security Council are angry tonight at the U.S. push for snapback sanctions on Iran, built around the U.S. dictating what's going to happen and the rest of the world seeing the attempt as unseemly. Pompeo says the move amounts to American leadership, and everyone's resistance will be viewed as siding with the Ayatollahs. Other nations said that in withdrawing from the deal and then trying to use the deal against the parties within it, the U.S. was being, quote, unpleasant, end quote. The U.S. is arguing that they're still sort of part of the P5+1 nuclear deal, despite publicly disavowing it. The deal had a secret clause allowing the U.S. to force the introduction of a U.S. resolution on Iran sanctions relief, and then argued that once they veto it, the sanctions will all be de facto back to pre-deal levels. Meanwhile, of course, Pompeo is out there warning that anybody who opposes them will be sanctioned. All righty. Apparently, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo failed miserably in his efforts Thursday to force the United Nations to reimpose its pre-JCPOA sanctions on Iran. Basically, Iran has violated some of the JCPOA's terms, but it did so only after Trump withdrew the United States from the agreement and reimposed crushing sanctions. In order to trigger the snapback mechanism built into the agreement, you have to be a participant in the agreement, which, of course, the U.S. ceased to be when Trump exited it in 2018. So here's basically what happened. The P5+1 deal was passed and ratified by all parties, including the United States. Iran complied with the requirements of the P5+1 deal. The United States did not. Iran curtailed certain nuclear activities. The U.S. had promised to remove sanctions. Not only did they not remove sanctions, they added more of them. So the U.S. was in violation of the P5+1 deal right from the very, very beginning. And then, of course, Trump pulls out of the deal, and Iran says, well, okay, I guess the deal is off, especially because of the sanctions. And now the U.S. wants to come back in and say, no. We didn't really leave the deal. We're still kind of, sort of, maybe part of it, and we want the sanctions back. And he's there. Once again, the United Nations is standing up to the United States and saying, no, this isn't appropriate. This isn't appropriate at all. Okay. An Iranian nuclear official said that the July 2nd fire at Natanz nuclear facility was the result of sabotage. The explosion at Natanz nuclear facility was the result of sabotage operations. Behruz Kamalvandi, a spokesman for Iran's Atomic Energy Organization, said on Sunday. Kamalvandi also said security officials will reveal the cause of the blast in due time. The Natanz explosion caused significant damage to the nuclear facility, and Iranian officials said it slowed down their centrifuge program. Since the blast, there's been much speculation of the cause, since Iran suspected sabotage from the beginning. Shortly after the incident, an unnamed Middle Eastern intelligence official told the New York Times Israel was responsible for the explosion, which was caused by a powerful bomb. Meanwhile, up in Syria, an ISIS terror attack on a pipeline has triggered a nationwide blackout. A massive explosion seen along the Arab gas pipeline outside Damascus early on Monday, resulting in power outages across Syria, was likely an attack by Islamic State, according to Reuters. Meanwhile, Syrian Representative Bashar al-Jafari has delivered remarks to the UN Security Council this week, complaining that the U.S. occupation forces are advancing efforts to steal Syrian oil and gas through a business deal reached with Crescent Delta Energy. That the U.S. is planning to steal Syrian oil is non-controversial, as President Trump has made that position public for months. Crescent Delta Energy is contracted to take the oil after Trump failed efforts to court larger companies. The deal is that any revenue going to Syria would be given to the Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces. Jafari noted to the UN that the resources in question are needed for reconstruction after the war. Again, this is not in serious dispute, and many see taking the oil as in part meant to assure that Syria can't reconstruct if the war ends in a way the U.S. does not approve of. Okay, we're coming up here on a commercial break here, and when we come on back, there's going to be more news. So please pay attention to our advertisers. It's important to keep RBN on the air, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Welcome back to our show here, and a friendly reminder and nudge that Republic Broadcasting is in the middle of a perpetual fundraising campaign. And once again, the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number, where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. The network thanks you. All right, apparently, getting back to Syria, Russian warplanes targeted Islamic State positions in the desert region in central and southern Syria on Friday. A total of 7 Russian warplanes struck IS positions in the desert region of the central province of Homs and the southern province of Sweda, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, without details on casualties. The Britain-based watchdog group said IS members have a thick presence in the desert region. Meanwhile, 3 Syrian soldiers were killed, 3 others wounded when an explosive device went off in the desert of Sweda. They're still fighting over there. The U.S.-led coalition in Iraq has withdrawn the last of its forces from Camp Taji, a base near Iraq's capital, Baghdad, that has been the target of recent rocket attacks. The coalition handed control of the base to Iraqi security forces, along with $347 million worth of military equipment. The anti-ISIS coalition, dubbed Operation Inherent Resolve, is hailing the move as a success and says it's part of a long-range plan with the Iraqi government. Camp Taji has historically held up to 2,000 coalition members, with the majority departing over the summer of 2020, the coalition said in a statement released on Sunday. The statement said the force was made up of Spanish helicopter battalion and military trainers from Australia, Canada, Finland, Germany, Hungary, Italy, Netherlands, New Zealand, Poland, Turkey, the UK, the US, and NATO. Okay, apparently there's been another unfortunate incident in Israel. Israeli forces last Friday invaded Maqsad Hospital in Jerusalem while firing off tear gas bombs, according to the Palestinian Information Center. Local sources said that dozens of patients and medical staff suffered breathing difficulties as a result of tear gas inhalation, making it necessary to evacuate many patients. Sources added that soldiers violently stormed the hospital, searched several rooms and offices while firing tear gas canisters. Field interrogations were held with a number of Palestinian civilians before the armed troops withdrew from the hospital. Over 10,000 people protest against Netanyahu in Jerusalem. 7 have been arrested. Demonstrators held a march through the capital despite police opposition. Officer was filmed shoving and striking protesters in Paris Square. Anyway. Okay, over a year after the Trump administration seized Venezuela's funding as part of its effort for regime change, officials say they're going to tap into that money to try and fund the regime change, which so far have failed to make any progress. So the U.S. has been trying to force this regime change in Venezuela for over a year. Initially, this amounted to the U.S. recognizing a change had happened, pushing the rest of the world to do the same, which the rest of the world didn't do. And between that and a failed coup, there were reports the administration was getting tired of not making any progress. Now, the U.S. has frozen about $300 million in funds that will be made available to the regime change efforts. That includes $20 million that will be used to send pandemic relief to Venezuela. What the rest will be spent on remains to be seen. Okay, China is issuing a warning that necessary countermeasures will be coming for any Asian country willing to host U.S. missiles. And it was about a year ago that the Pentagon first announced it would move forward with plans to deploy intermediate range ballistic missiles to Asia, quote, within months, end quote, an ambitious timeline which of course never materialized. Nevertheless, a prospect that remained on the table ever since, driving tensions higher as part of what Beijing has slammed repeatedly as Washington's Cold War mentality. In a new statement, China's foreign ministry has vowed it will take countermeasures should any U.S. ally in the region agree to host U.S. missiles. Now remember, the intermediate range ballistic missiles were the subject of that treaty that the U.S. walked away from. All right, so let's talk about COVID-19 because it's still out there, but apparently corona cases are down 37% over the last 30 days. And apparently official cases have resumed falling fairly briskly, with the 7-day running average now down 37% since July 25th. Billions of dollars that was set aside for COVID-19 testing is still unspent, according to a new report. This was money that was approved by Congress last spring. It's still sitting there. Okay, this is a very important point they're making here over at Natural News. If mask mandates are justified by people testing positive coronavirus, they will never end because the tests will never stop reporting fake cases. And they're making a very, very good point here. If the mask mandates continue because somebody's testing positive for coronavirus, well, what about the problem that these tests that are being used have false positives? These tests are largely flawed and produce disturbingly high numbers of false positives. Even when the tests are accurate in terms of a genetic match for the virus, if a person isn't sick with symptoms, then it's not a case to begin with. Okay, we're coming up here on another commercial break. When we come on back, more about COVID-19 and its fallout. We'll be right back. And welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about COVID-19 and the effect of the lockdown and everything. Looks like Spain may be going back to lockdown next month because the numbers over there are not really particularly good. Now, one of the aspects of the lockdowns is education, and there's a big debate raging right now about whether to reopen the schools or not. And there's been a bit of a development down in Tennessee where this school district is facing criticism for asking parents to refrain from listening in during their children's online classroom instruction. They even went so far as to send a form to be signed by the parents saying, I will not listen to what's going on. Now, we've been talking about Common Core for a while now and how it's filled with a lot of very left-leaning propaganda about the environment, about racism, about the Second Amendment. And apparently some parents who have been eavesdropping on the classroom instruction are appalled by what they're hearing. And I'm hoping that this will trigger a flashback where parents are going to say, you tell us what it is you're teaching our children. I would like to see that. All righty, let's see. According to the head of the UN's hunger-fighting body, the COVID-19 pandemic may lead to a calamity of epic scale with millions facing starvation worldwide. That certainly could happen here in the United States of America. I mean, have you looked at the damage to our agricultural sector up there in Iowa, where that weather came through about a week ago and just absolutely trashed the place? We're going to be coming up on a point where the preppers are going to be saying, I told you so, I told you so, told you so. But they're warning a famine of biblical proportions looms over humanity due to the COVID-19. All the data we have, including WFP forecast that the number of people experiencing malnutrition will grow by 80% by the end of the year. Dark times indeed here. Okay, story coming on out of naturalnews.com. Big Pharma exposed. Study of 3 top medical journals reveals that many medications, medical products, and services are completely ineffective. For example, one study looked at antidepressants mirtazapine and sertraline, which are recommended as first-line treatments for clinical depression regardless of age. The study showed that the 2 drugs did not make any significant difference in depressive symptoms in older adults with Alzheimer's disease. In addition to medication, the study identified useless interventions like wearable step tracking technology for promoting weight loss. They also discussed dangerous medical recommendations like annual or biannual mammograms for women who are at a low risk of breast cancer under the age of 50. Those recommendations prey on women's very understandable fear of breast cancer, when the truth is that radiation from excessive mammograms is actually a breast cancer risk itself. It's all about the money. It's all about the money. All right. We're going to go ahead and open the phone lines now. And that's 800-313-9443. Getting into the economic news here, China's steel output jumps to a new record high in July as demand recovers. As the world's second largest economy recovers from the coronavirus pandemic, its steel sector reached record high output last month, according to fresh industry data. China produced 93 million tons of crude steel in July, or 3 million tons a day, which is over 9% more than it did in the same period last year. Chinese media reported on Monday, citing the China Iron and Steel Association. The figures coincide with data from the National Bureau of Statistics released earlier this month. July crude steel output exceeded the previous monthly record of 92.27 tons set in May. From January to July, China churned out 593 million tons of crude steel, with production rising 2.8% year on year. Okay, here in the U.S., the default bomb has gone off. 2020 will have a record number of large corporate bankruptcies. The disconnect between the all-time highs in the stock market and the broader economy has never been greater, with even Janet Yellen, one of the main architects of this disconnect, agreeing. And one of the places where this chasm is most glaring is in the staggering number of major corporations filing for bankruptcy in 2020. Indeed, this year, large U.S. corporate bankruptcy filings are running at a record pace and are set to surpass levels reached during the financial crisis in 2009, when the S&P was far from an all-time high. According to Financial Times calculations, as of August 17th, a record 45 companies, each with more than $1 billion in assets, has filed for Chapter 11 this year. This compares with 38 for the same period in 2009 during the depths of the financial crisis, and is more than double last year's figure of 18 over the comparable period. All right, Blackstone Group Incorporated, the new vampire squid, said it's agreed to acquire genealogy provider Ancestry.com Incorporated from private equity rivals for $4.7 billion, including debt, placing a big bet on family tree chasing as well as personalized medicine. Ancestry.com is the world's largest provider of DNA services, allowing customers to chase their genealogy and identify genetic health risks with tests sent to their home. Blackstone is hoping that more consumers staying at home during the COVID-19 pandemic will turn to Ancestry.com for its services. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Would you really want to know that you had a genetic predisposition to die young? Anyway, have to decide on that one. Of course, that's not a problem for me. There's no way I'm going to die young now. Anyway, we believe Ancestry has significant runway for further growth as people of all ages and backgrounds become increasingly interested in learning more about their family histories and themselves. David Kastenbaum, a Blackstone senior manager director, said in a statement. Planned Parenthood quietly aborts the annual Margaret Sanger Award. And Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, is not problematic because she once told an off-color joke or flew a Confederate flag. The woman was a monster, a vile racist and eugenicist who praised the Nazi sterilization tactics, including those suffering from congenital feeble-mindedness, schizophrenia, circular insanity, hereditary epilepsy, hereditary chorea, Huntington's disease, hereditary blindness or deafness, grave hereditary bodily deformity, and chronic alcoholism. All right, an Israel advocacy group has urged Facebook to label criticism of Israel as hate speech. On August 7th, amid broad efforts to get Facebook to clamp down on extremist activity and hate speech, more than 120 organizations sent a letter to the social media giant urging it to fully adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism as the cornerstone of Facebook's hate speech policy regarding anti-Semitism. Okay, what we have here is Israel's claim that any criticism of Israel's actions represents hatred of the Jewish people. That's like saying that any criticism of the Nazis is founded in hatred of the German people. And you can see how silly that is, you know, when you look at it on the face of it. And yet Israel has been pushing this for 60 years, that no criticism of Israel's actions can be allowed because it's hatred of the Jewish people. No, it isn't. It's criticism of the actions of a government, something that is protected speech under the First Amendment. So, anyway. Okay, we've got some callers coming in here now. Let's start with Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. What you were just saying. Wow. Yeah. Education. So it's our known fact that Common Core is in fact a good. It's horrible, but it comes across as dumbing down education, especially when math is concerned, right? You want to hear something? Same thing happened up here in Canada, right? We had the Liberals in Ontario for almost 20 years, or they were booted out. 20 years, Mike. That's a generation.
Yes.
Anyway, they doubled the provincial debt, more than doubled it, and they basically handed out calculators to kids in grade 5. No more, as far as arithmetic, having to just, know that 2 plus 2 is 4 and 2 times 2 is 4 and 4 and 5 are 9 and 9 and 5 are 6, whatever, on and on and on and on. So when Doug Ford, he's a conservative, PC, progressive conservative, he got elected, everybody was all up in arms because he wanted to change the curriculum. And that was in 2018. And here's the funny thing, Mike, you can see how people feel about this stuff with the comments on the CBC, the state-sponsored propaganda website. Back then, they were just denouncing this guy for doing this. Now they're saying, well, this is good. 2 years later, they literally, Mike, wanted to go back to flashcards. Remember that?
Yes.
Yep. Because, you need to know this. You don't have to think about it. You know it. There's a difference between knowing and thinking. Thinking requires critical thinking skills. And that's something that was absolutely thrown out the door starting like 40, 50 years ago. And it's just gotten to the point where it's worse.
I remember when I was a kid in school, we had to memorize the multiplication tables out to 10 times 10.
15. When I was in school, it was 15.
Okay, well, you went to a tougher school than I did.
No, actually, I don't think so. But the 10 thing is very important because it's metric. Metric is all about tens.
Yes.
Right? 1 to the, if, let's say 4 to the power of 6 and all that jazz. And when you get into that, the number of zeros behind something and blah, blah, blah. United States, they shun the metric system.
Yeah, I remember when that was going through and we were all trying to go metric and, I think it would have been a good idea, but, the social inertia won out.
Well, the problem is you have like the grandfathered folk, let's just say, right? They like that, SAE system, pounds and feet and miles and, all that kind of jazz, Fahrenheit. Yeah, I like both, and for different reasons, because there are 25 millimeters in an inch.
Yes.
I'm a millwright. I use a tape measure. So instead of it being a 16th, it's like 1/25th. Fahrenheit, 80 degrees Fahrenheit is about what, 28 or 29 degrees Celsius. I like Fahrenheit. You know what I mean? Because you can be more accurate with it. So that's how I look at it. In a totally different manner than anyone else would, I suppose. But I'm looking for accuracy, not for any. I'm not one of these cheerleaders for one over the other. It just happens.
Well, I prefer metric, but I understand why people just avoir de part was like there were efforts a few years ago to change the layout on keyboards away from the QWERTY because believe it or not, the QWERTY keyboard was designed to be as slow as possible to minimize jams on early typewriters. And when computers came along, they said, well, we can redesign the layout on the keyboard for more efficiency and speed. But people, I think it was the Dvorak keyboard is what they called it. It never caught on.
No. Well, everybody had that, I took typing in high school because the keyboard, right? And it's FJDKSLSM space. That was like drilled into my head. I don't know if you ever took, I don't type anyways. I mean, I'll use my 2 index fingers and I'm all over the place at the speed of sound.
Yes.
You can't even see my hands moving. Anyways, that's all I have, Mike. I appreciate your time.
And, all right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. Thank you for the phone call.
Thanks a lot.
Say again?
What happened with Dustin? I haven't heard him in a while.
He was on late last week, and I'm sure he'll be he'll be calling in again. Anyway, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Steve Elkins. Steve, welcome to the show. I understand you're going to be sharing the microphone with John Stadmiller tonight.
Yeah, my Monday ritual. Yes.
Okay.
Hey, I want to discuss the convalescent plasma. It's nothing really new. It's been used in the hospital for a little while for the early stages of the COVID respiratory virus. And I wanted to mention some things I thought about last night when I first saw the FDA had given the authorization to use this technique. It's nothing new. But I did spot some problems with it, and I wanted to talk about that real quick here. That you're talking about taking blood from people that had COVID-19 that were survived and did well. Actually, they built up antibodies to the virus itself, now have future immunity. So you got to now find these people. You got to find these people that had it. You got to get authorization and have them donate blood. So you've got this procedure, this great procedure the FDA is authorized to use. You have a high demand and you have a very low supply of blood or plasma for this procedure. So the question I thought, well, what happened to the hydroxychloroquine and Zithromax and zinc? We found several doctors that came out. Of course, they were deplatformed later on for bringing out this information that, hey, we got a solution here to the problem. Well, we can't use that. So that's been scrapped. I don't know why it's been scrapped. Nobody's talking about it. I mean, if it was good enough for your president to have it prophylactically, I would assume it's still pretty good medicine to use right now, but it's been scrapped for some reason. And the only thing I can come up with is that it's been scrapped because they want to continue this death toll raising the death toll, get that number up, fear campaign. They still want to lock things down as much as they possibly can until the people actually wake up. They're not done destroying this economy for what other reasons they've got other than the economy and tanking Wall Street. And maybe it's the rebuilding phase. Maybe it's the new industrial revolution of restarting the reset for everything, the economy, for Wall Street. I don't know. There's certainly a lot of profiteers on this scamdemic, plandemic.
That would definitely be where I think the problem is, hydroxychloroquine can't be patented. There's no market exclusivity. Everybody can make it, which would drive down the price. And I think the big pharmaceutical companies are still holding out for some kind of a treatment that they can own and charge whatever they want for.
Yeah. I think it's the old saying, it's always about the money. Yeah. Always.
It is.
I just want to bring that to your attention. You're going to have a high demand. You're going to have a low supply. And they're going to be pushing people to, first of all, they got to locate these people and then get...
Steve, I got to put you on hold. Don't hang up. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. And welcome back to our show here. We're talking with fellow RBN host Steve Elkins, who'll be sharing the mic tonight with John Stadmiller, as he normally does every Monday. So, Steve, could you kind of just sort of pick up where you left off?
Yeah, I'm just saying there's going to be a high demand for a treatment that you're going to have low supply of what you need, the plasma, from these COVID positive patients that have healed. It's just strange. And you're right. It's probably all about the money here. The pharmaceuticals don't want to acknowledge that. But this would be the perfect time, actually, for those physicians we saw on TV that came forward and said they've used these medications in trials, these three medications, Zithromax, hydroxychloroquine. Yeah, hydroxychloroquine and Zithromax as an antibiotic, and also the zinc, and been very successful. And as soon as they said that, they actually were deplatformed, and many of them lost their jobs, which that's a red flag. That's telling me that they were onto something. They were over the target to begin with.
Yes.
I don't know. It'd be nice if these people could actually, who verbalized that in the beginning, somehow get to the airwaves and get the message out there that there is a solution, which is it's not that costly and it's available. And waiting around trying to find people that were positive to use their plasma is it's a waiting game. You got to wait, and you got to track them, you got to find them, and by that time you're out of luck because time is essential on some of these things, especially with the elderly. So I'm hoping that somebody will come back, get in the news somehow, and say, this is your solution. Don't wait for the plasma, and go back to what worked the first time.
Well, first of all, my question would be, are we absolutely sure the plasma is going to work at all? I mean, just because the FDA approved it, is not very reassuring.
Well, I can tell you offhand, from my experience, it is working.
Okay.
Personal. Okay. It's working. It's nothing new. It's been used for the last couple months. It's just now catching the airways in the mainstream media. It's been used for the last couple of months. Not too many people have been talking about it, but it's been used. I know it for a fact, and it's been successful. But if you don't have much of it on supply, that's your problem. So why not go back to something else? Your number one, or maybe it's your number two. Go back to using the other medications, the threesome.
Okay. Anything else?
Personally, that's it, Mike.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. We'll tune into you later on tonight after my show. And let's switch over to Charles in St. Pete. Hello, Charles. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey there, Mike. Have you seen the latest from Henry Makow? It's HENRYMAKOW.com for
Yes.
August 23rd. The Melbourne is falling apart. That's Melbourne, Australia. Melbourne
Yes.
is a sophisticated metropolis of 5 million. Have you been over this? I didn't know if you.
No, I didn't read the article. I mean, I've been to Australia, but not Melbourne.
No, but it's becoming a dystopian nightmare. I'm reading
Okay.
the
All right, Charles, stay on the line. Charles, stay on the line. I got to put you on hold. We got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. We're talking with Charles in St. Pete about Melbourne, Australia, and how it's turning into a dystopian nightmare down there. So, Charles, if you could pick up where you left off.
Yeah, it says here the only consolation is the leftist population is getting its comeuppance. They were for all this stuff, and now they get to be with everybody else in total lockdown. You can't leave. The army is deployed at stops outside of Melbourne, prevent anyone from getting out or in. Heavy police and army presence on foot in the streets and on the roads and in the skies. And this is henrymakow.com. I saw it on the trueseeker.co.uk. The state is in an absolute disarray. I don't even know where to begin. I think by now, if you're reading this, you know about the draconian measures currently enforced in Victoria, Australia, particularly Melbourne, which is that the tone around here is generally apathetic or support for these measures, particularly in the hard left, who are protesting to dismantle cops mere months ago. As part of the BLM is pure cognitive dissonance. I guess that means insanity. Anyway, it goes on here. It's really interesting. How these Stasi, what are the contact, what is it? A contact, CT, contact
tracing?
Yeah, in Joseph Paul Watson has about this too on Alex Jones about how New Zealand and Australia have turned into total police states now. We're not even aware of this.
I know in New Zealand, they'll literally take children away from their parents to enforce the coronavirus.
Yeah. Well, that's what I have to report, and
okay.
Really terrible.
All right. Anything else?
No, nothing.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. Then we're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Hello, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I also wanted to talk about Australia. I just want to say one thing first about that. Ancestry, 23andMe. Folks, don't be stupid. Don't use that. You're giving these people just what they want. If they want to manufacture a bioweapon based on genetics, you give them all they want. Okay, so that's about all one of my cousins did it. I told her she was an idiot for doing it. Okay, but anyway, getting back to Melbourne, what's going on in Melbourne and New Zealand and all that? Here is the prime reason for the Second Amendment, okay, and for the Constitution as a whole. But the Constitution has no teeth other than that Second Amendment. And thank God we've got hundreds of millions of guns and hundreds of millions of gun owners, private gun owners in this country. Because if we didn't, they would have already tried something. They've come close already, but never been able to quite do what we're seeing now in Melbourne. And just not too many years ago, the Australians just meekly gave up their guns. This goes to show you when instead of taking an oath to a constitution and to a country, you take an oath to a bunch of inbred pedophiles and cannibals and vampires that makes up the British royal family. Okay, that's the oath they take. That's the same thing with Canada. Same thing with all the other so-called Commonwealth countries. New Zealand. I'm not sure if India still is part of the Commonwealth or not. But this is this is why it's so important for the United States. We are the last bastion, maybe Russia also, against this New World Order, and to stop what they're trying to do, Mike. They want total control, and probably then, as they get total control, they'll probably get rid of us. They're now talking about forcing a vaccine, Virginia and Massachusetts. Well, I think Virginia should have learned already when they tried to take away guns and when armed patriots surrounded the Capitol that time. And they had actually had the support of a lot of, not police, but of sheriffs, really, who were, of course, elected by the people. That's another thing that reminds me of this. There was I saw on Gerald Celente earlier, some police chief in Washington, state of Washington, I'm not sure what town, I think it might have been Pullman, Washington or something, made a statement that anybody who doesn't wear a mask, caught not wearing a mask in the state of Washington now should be fined $5,000 and put a year in jail. Okay, here's an example of a tyrant. Okay, here's an example of, again, why the Second Amendment is so important and why this clown doesn't even listen to us. Remember that policeman, I think he was in airport, the Seattle airport, CTEC?
Yeah.
He was fired for it, he said, too. He made a statement that, they need the support of the people, otherwise they can't do their job, which is, he didn't want to say it outright what he really meant. I know what he really meant. They would be overwhelmed. Now, they've lost, they're hated by the left. Are these people that stupid? Okay, is that arrogance of wearing a badge and a gun? Does that make them that dumb that they don't understand if they lose the right in the middle, they will be done away with? I mean, they will be disbanded. I don't know what's going on. I think what's happening is they're hiring people and even promoting people with probably an IQ just maybe a little bit north of 70. And this is one of the problems. Because they don't seem to think. They don't seem to think, This is, like I said, what's happening in Melbourne should serve as an example. Every American, we are the only real constitutional democracy, constitutional republic in the world today, okay? A democracy is not a constitutional republic. A constitutional republic is an extra form of democracy. It was designed by the founding fathers to be such. But if we just ignore it, or we allow it to be ignored, then we will get it. And I don't know if you saw that guy, Carlos Zapata, what he said when he went to his town meeting in Shasta, California, and basically told him he's a veteran. He's I guess, Iraq War veteran.
Mm-hmm.
He said he never wants to go to war again, but he will if he has to. Okay? And this time, if he has to go against, fight other American people. So, I mean, he said it very bluntly. He told these clowns there at the city council that they're hiding their right to wear a mask because they should be hiding their faces for what they've done. Okay, and he lost his business, and he said people are starving. 7 other veterans that he knows have killed themselves since this has started. Okay, people get it through your heads. Okay, we got to make our stand. They cannot get away. We can never let what happened in Melbourne or New Zealand happen to us, happen to any city in this country. Now, I know it's more likely to happen to a blue city like New York City or something like that. But even there, we must understand we cannot let this happen, folks. Please understand what's going on. This is an attempt by the ruling class, mostly these billionaires, to grab total control of the rest of us, especially the technocrats, the Wall Streeters. That's where the real virus is, Mike. The virus is not some little, I don't know, microscopic insect, whatever it's supposed to be, or a germ. The real virus is two-legged, and it's in Washington. It's in, at least in this country, it's in Washington. It's in Silicon Valley, and it's on Wall Street. Those are the viruses. Those are the two-legged viruses. And folks, when you wear them stupid masks, all you're doing is you're submitting. You're submitting like a bunch of sheep, wearing a worthless mask that protects nobody, doesn't protect you, doesn't protect anybody else. Just a virtue signal to the ruling class who sit comfortably in their offices or wherever. They don't even have to go out. They don't have to go, they don't have to worry about wearing a mask where they're working, okay? And they're telling you what to do. Folks, wake up, okay? Wake up. These are not really elites. These are mostly a bunch of inbred, spoiled, rotten, very weak men and women, okay, who are basically useless. They've gotten their money and wealth mostly by either inheritance or by swindling other people and getting it, okay? You don't become a billionaire by being honest. Very few. There may be a couple here or there, but for the most part, these are crooks. These are swindlers. And they mean us no good. And like I said before, I said on my YouTube channel already a few times, what we need is a 20 to 30% wealth tax on these clowns, these billionaires. You take some of their money away and take away their power by doing that, because that's what they're doing. They're using their wealth as a weapon against the rest of us. And that's what I don't know whether you agree with me, Mike. I think you partly do, but you probably disagree to a degree. But that's really
no. Actually, I find myself in agreement here that we seem to have this class of people who feel that having a lot of money gives them the right to tinker with the rest of the planet like it's their personal plaything. And given that we did not elect these people to rule over us. Remember what it says in the Declaration of Independence: governments derive their just power from the consent of the governed. I'm not consenting to have Bill Gates make my medical choices for me. I'm not consenting for George Soros, to be shifting the government around for his behalf.
Exactly, Mike. Exactly. But that's the way it's become, because they've gotten it. Once the capitalism becomes predatory, and capitalism in this country has become predatory now.
Yes.
It starts where the predators start eating everything up, and they even eat up the government. They take over the government. So instead of being government for the people and by the people, it becomes a government for the billionaires and by the billionaires. That's what we're facing right now. We got to change it. I don't care. You want to call it socialism? I don't care what you call it. Ism, doesn't matter. We got to change it. We got to take our country back. We got to take this republic back, this constitutional republic. We got to get rid of the empire. You were just saying, some of the stuff we're doing overseas, it's shameful. Makes me ashamed to be American when I see we stealing the Syrians' oil. We kill a man like General Soleimani. We continue to start trouble with Russia, now with Belarus and all that. As far as I'm concerned, that the guy who heads Belarus, what's his name, Chenko or whatever, he's
Lukashenko.
More of a man, and I respect him 1,000 times more than the four idiots running for president right now, president and vice president in this country. Okay, he's the kind of I wish we had somebody like him running in this country right now. Okay, rather than the clowns we got. Okay, so that's it. He's a patriot at least. He's a patriot. And he stands for his people. All right, and that's why they hate him so much. Very few people wear a mask there, because he said right from the get-go, just drink vodka and go work in your tractors. You'll be fine. And basically they are. Very low cases, as far as I know, of this stupid COVID. Maybe a few cases, the silly, because the silly tests and all that, which mean nothing. But nobody, very few real cases. You know what I mean? So that's the kind of person we need. And that's why the globalists hate him so much, including the International Monetary Fund, which refuses to give him a loan. Okay? This is the kind of person we need. He may be a kind of a strong man. He's not a real dictator. He's kind of a strong man. Really, that's what we need, a real strong man. But a strong man who stands for the people, not for the corporation. And that's it, Mike.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot for the phone call, Mark. We're going to switch over to Tom in Florida. Hello, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day, Michael. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. You're on the air.
Okay, yeah, Mike. First off, what I wanted to talk about is the little boy over there in Delaware, right by where Biden lives. The two girls that took his hat off his head, and the mother was videotaping them, and they were tearing up Trump signs and all that. If that would have been reversed, it would have been Obama. I mean, if it would have been Obama signs or Biden signs, and a Trump guy was doing that, they would put him in jail. The two broads, the two 21-year-old punks, white trash.
Mm-hmm.
They had some black guy act like he was their pimp. He was like, there's a black guy like he was like set him up to do it, and then when they got caught, he's like trying to mediate it, but actually he was like, yeah. Have you seen the video of that, Mike?
Yes, I have.
That's really disgusting. A 7-year-old little kid like that, with the impression he's going to have when he gets like 17 years old, something going to be unbelievable. And by the way, speaking of what Mark just said, I think Dustin should watch that movie with Jim Carrey, The Mask, because we all wear a mask. Everybody wears a mask. I mean, that movie is like way ahead of its time. We're all wearing a mask, aren't we? I mean, it's unbelievable what's going on. Mike, and there's so much going on right now here in even South Florida. We've had a lot of protesters they had in the Herald breaking and entering B&Es, people robbing cars like crazy, smashing windows out, taking people's stuff off their. I mean, it's happening all over the United States, but I think people are really going to get fed up and say enough is enough. I mean, this is insanity, man. This country isn't on the brink of I don't know what is, Mike. I guess it is a civil war. I don't know, but watching those two white trash broads, brutalize that little boy mentally, not only physically but mentally. The scar they put on that little kid it's terrible. And then you have the two little sisters watch their brother get murdered. 5 years old, the guy walks up and shoots him right in the head. Now, Mike, I don't know what's going on in Kenosha, but I guess the cop shot the guy, some guy, black guy. What's going on with that? I really don't know the details of that.
Well, again, the police in Kenosha, Wisconsin, were called to break up a domestic dispute, and there was a man trying to stop the fight, and it turned out the man trying to stop the fight had warrants out on him. So the police tried to detain him. He tried to leave, and it led to that shooting. And I think what's really upset a lot of people, and it upsets me too, why they had to shoot him 7 times. Now, again, amazingly enough, he's still alive, and he's in the hospital. But they did shoot him 7 times right in front of his kids who were in that car.
Well, Mike, for the life of me, I don't know why the cops federally all over the United States don't have those guns that Sean Hannity had with the tear gas balls. When they hit you all automatically basically fall down. I don't care how strong you are. I don't care if you're 400 pounds. One of those balls hitting you and the gas gets right into you, you're going down on the ground. And I believe all the police should have those round balls when they shoot, and they if you have a heart problem, you could probably die. But I mean, come on. I mean, just shoot them with one of those, or have make some kind of real taser, like can shoot like 50 yards out. And really,
supposedly this guy was tasered once, and he kept on going.
Well, then okay. See, that's what I'm saying. Some of these guys are they get on drugs and stuff, and they're like Supermen. Like, they get on these drugs, they get nuts. But going back to Mike, and I'm looking at this convention today compared to bumbling buffoonery of Biden. And like I said, the New Jerseyans and Californians are gone. They're going to be liberal states for 50 years, Mike. Don't you believe? Because they're wanting all free. Want to free. I want free. I mean, come on. I mean, it's California. It's got. I saw in the convention today, Mike. There's almost 6 million registered Republican voters in that state. Can you imagine? There's 8 million illegals in that state, Mike.
Yeah.
More illegals in that state than there's registered Republican voters. Now, you tell me who should be arrested. Like I've been saying for months and a year, Mike, these Democrats, Trump should have them all rounded up, put in handcuffs, and thrown in the clink. They should be in the clink for at least 6 months so they can cool off and understand what they have done. I would actually like to give 5 years myself. I could put them all in 5 years, or ship them down to Venezuela or Cuba, mainly Cuba. Let's ship them to Cuba or Haiti. That's where they really need to go. Get a real lesson. I mean, these punks are spoiled. They got all this money on their little job. They would, like $185,000 a year as a congressman. It's a joke.
Mhm.
They don't do nothing. They're on recess most of the time. It's ridiculous. And, American people, Mike, I'm telling the people I talk to are getting fed up. I mean, really fed up. To the point where it's, I don't know what's going to happen, Mike. It's off the charts. But, like, again, that little boy, if that would have been a black little boy and if that would have been a black little boy, those two girls that did that to him, it would be on every news network.
It certainly would.
I noticed,
It
Mike.
certainly would. Okay, Tom, I got to put you on hold. Don't hang up. Going to put you on hold. Going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Tom in Florida. We're talking about society and how disjointed everything has become lately. So, Tom, if you could pick up where you left off.
Yeah, Mike, Mike, listen, California is gone, pretty much. Jersey, too, and New York. I don't know. New York might swing around because so many people are leaving there that I don't know what's going to happen in that state. Upper state New York's kind of conservative. But in some parts, a little bit of pockets of Jersey. And you even had a guy in Jersey who was a Democrat who switched to the Republican Party, Bannon. Well, I think that was a good first step. But, yeah, Mike, just looking at what's going to happen in this election and also how the blue states are getting trampled. They're getting trampled on. I mean, it's terrible, It's unbelievable. Hey, by the way, Mike, the blue states are nuts. But, by the way, did you get a chance to see that movie with John Travolta? White Man's Burden?
No, I didn't.
I wish you'd watch that movie and talk about it maybe tomorrow or one day this week. I want you to watch that movie. I think you all have some material there. John Travolta. He made a movie 25 years ago, almost 26 years ago. It's called The White Man's Burden. And I forgot the other, I can't think of his name right now, but the black actor, I can't remember his name. Anyway, he's in the movie. John Travolta. It was a really good movie. I thought it was pretty interesting. Also, Mike, I do got to tell you this. There's some good news that I got to explain to your audience. I told a couple of my friends to watch this movie, Uncle Tom, at my friend's house, and they're college age kids and his daughter, and she got a couple of her friends to watch Uncle Tom, and let me tell you, Mike, they all switched from Democrat. Now they want to vote Republican, or if anything, they're going to go independent. I'm telling you, that documentary is that explosive. If Trump was smart, he would get 1 million copies of that and distribute them all over the universities. I'm telling you, it will.
Yes.
It'll annihilate the Democratic Party. Uncle Tom will shock them to their senses, I believe. And so I just want to bring that out, because I know a couple young people going to college at FIU here, and they're all like, "Wow, man!" After that just threw them. That who they can't believe they're voting for Democrats. So, I just thought I'd throw it. And, bumbling Biden the other day when his final speech was talking about, the Charlottesville, whatever. I mean, Charlottesville, whatever. Remember, Virginia?
Yeah.
Mike? Well, when Biden's talking about that, but he don't say nothing about, nothing good about the police officers. He didn't say nothing about our cities are burning up, but he's worried about talking about the Ku Klux Klan. Hey, Biden, the Klan was founded by the Democrats. Bumbling buffoonery, the idiot. The guy's Mike, they must have gave that guy some major shots, B shots, vitamin B to keep him going on that speech, because usually he fumbles and bumbles. But, he's looking at a teleprompter, so who knows what? They probably had an earplug in his ear. Hey, Joe, keep awake. Who knows what they gave him some major caffeine or something. Something happened. But, that speech was still dull and boring. It was disgusting, really. It's all about hating this country. That's all the Democrats got is hate. No, talk bad at this. Nothing ever has been great about this country for these Democrats. Look at Mendez in New Jersey, Mike. They still voted him in. That creep. He's as worse as Epstein. He's Jeffrey Epstein Jr. Who's kidding who here? So, the hypocrisy of the left and all the media and all these licky, kissy, touchy-feelies, I call them, bend-over types. It's just absurd. It's absurd, man. And, we'll see what happens now. I think Trump's going to get a big bounce out of his convention because people are going to realize you got to defend your police officers. You got to have law enforcement. Otherwise, this country looked like that movie with Kurt Russell, Escape from New York. Remember the first one, Snake?
Yep.
From New York. So, that's what this society is leading to if we allow the bubbling buffoonery of Democrats. And one more thing, Mike. Tulsi Gabbard, did you hear her speak yesterday?
Yes.
Yeah, Tulsi say they wouldn't even let her. They wouldn't even give her a minute, but they gave AOC a minute. They wouldn't even let her speak at the Democratic convention. And now I don't know if she's ever going to switch maybe to a Republican, but I really believe she's going to run as an independent in the future in Hawaii. That's what I'm thinking.
think she very well might. She's very popular in Hawaii. And a lot of people are very surprised that she didn't do better. But then, she was espousing all the things the power brokers hate. She's anti-war, genuinely anti-war, because she served in a war zone. And, I really thought she had a shot at the nomination this year. But again, they gave us Biden.
I'll tell you what, Mike, I really wish she would run for an independent in Hawaii and shake the core of the Democratic Party there because, look at, what was his name? Lieberman. He ran as an independent. Didn't he won? Lieberman?
Yes.
No, Lieberman. So maybe she should take that playbook and I think she should run as an independent and switch, get out of that party. Because the Democrats they're going down to the doom. They're doom and gloom. That's all I can basically say. But we'll see now, Mike. I think Trump had a really nice speech today. I really enjoyed it. Even Pence had a nice little speech. And, there's such a contrast between these two campaigns. It's unbelievable. The demon rats are nothing but shameful. And the Republicans was like, hey, man, you're individual. Go make some money. Be a capitalist. Find a job.
Well, it's almost like, Biden is replaying Hillary Clinton in 2016. He's not really out there campaigning because they think they're going to steal it.
Absolutely, Mike.
Okay, Tom, I got to let you go.
Mike.
Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We'll be right back with another phone call. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Breaking news, man. Steve Bannon, last seen pole vaulting over the southern wall, heading to Mexico.
Okay.
Mike, I got a
Must
new
be a
title.
heck of a pole.
Yeah, but you know what his new book's going to be called?
What?
Build the wall, behind the wall, break out over the wall. And I read actually the indictment on Steve Bannon. I know somebody called Friday. He's innocent until proven guilty. And sure, this was a political indictment, but if you read through the indictment, it's pretty damning, man. Like, I read through the whole thing, and I was like, I'll go through it real quick. Basically, he set up a shell company, and they set up phony invoices. He took $1 million out, gave Brian, was it Colfidge? That's the triple amputee, veteran. He gave him $100,000 and 20% per month after that, which, I think you saw the pictures of his wife or his girlfriend washing down her, the SUV and stuff like that. And you know what, they got jewelry and this or that, But Mike, they have text messages supposedly of him talking to these three other people. But here's what's crazy. They weren't encrypted. Somebody in October 2019 must have leaked to them. They're under investigation. The We Build the Wall. They started encrypting their text messages. So I was like, holy crap, man. Yeah, they're in trouble. And you got 4 people there. If one flips, they're all in trouble, right? I mean,
yes.
Loose lips sink ships. But is that capitalism? Mike, the people who put money into that fund the wall are the Marks. It was
Yes.
They're the Marks, but look at the amount of money, though, Mike. I mean, if you think about it, if they weren't caught, they can do. I mean, you're obviously not going to take all $25 million, right? But you'll slowly bleed it dry, right? Because
Yes.
it'll constantly probably get more funding, right? With the GoFundMe or whatever. That's why, Mike, I don't trust GoFundMes. Do you? I have a
No. The potential for abuse is definitely there.
because you're basically giving money to potentially fund a project that might not even get started. And they can just create something, make the money and run, and you'll never see a cent of that. You know, I mean, so yeah, I mean, this was and you know, he made $1 million a year from Breitbart. That's a lot of money. I mean, you know,
I could be very happy with $1 million a year. I wouldn't have to go out and do a GoFundMe scam on top of that.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Mike. What's better than $47 million a year? 48, right? I mean,
Right.
You know, it's you know what I mean. Like, but the whole thing is, just because, and I talked to my friend about this. Just because you're worth 48 million, don't mean you have 48 million. These people had bills to pay, man. Don't we all? Now, you know.
Well, your net worth is your assets minus your liabilities. So if you have a home that's worth $1 million and the mortgage outstanding on it is $500,000, then your net worth is $500,000. Doesn't mean you have $500,000 in cash on hand. Just means that's what your worth is on paper.
So paper doesn't necessarily. It means you still got a bill to pay at the end of the month, right? That's what it comes down to. That's right. Yeah, and like, so don't feel sorry for Steve Bannon. I mean,
I don't feel sorry for Steve Bannon.
Oh no, but you know, he got out. He paid $1.25 million to get out. I mean, that's such a chunk of change to pay to just say, be in court. You know, I mean, that's a lot of money, man. Like, I mean, but I'm like, what I'm coming out to say is like, Tom says, demon rats or the Republic, they're all the same. Dude, do you know how much money's flowing around, Tom? Like, it doesn't matter who you vote for, man. Like, the system, Mike, you talked about it. The sanctions continue with Iran and Mike Pompeo. You got, Tom, I want to ask Tom, what happened to the Clinton Foundation investigation? Was there any? I mean, there's just nothing going on. Again,
No,
like,
nothing ever came of that. The Clintons are untouchables.
Which means the system's untouchable, right?
Right.
Is that it? See? That's it, Mike. You know, and there was one more thing I'm going to say, if I can remember. Oh, okay. Real quick. The reason why Australia locked down Victoria is because there was like a family who got infected, and there's like 20 other people that started getting, so they had to lock down that part of Victoria. They're not messing around. And the same with New Zealand. I know New Zealand now is mandating masks on mass transit because, you know, in mass transit, you're close to people.
Oh, yeah.
Closer to people. Yeah, so that's why they did that. Mike, have a good show. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I'm calling tomorrow.
All right. Thanks an awful lot, Dustin. We're going to let you go and switch over to Paul in New Jersey. Hello, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Mike, one of the things I like to do is dissect common political platitudes. And Tom is a great example of Republican talking points. You know, he pulls out like selective historical epics and tries to pin it on the Democrats, as in the Democrats being solely responsible for the KKK. Now, if you ever looked at what the Tuskegee Institute said about the total deaths during the through lynchings in the United States, you would find that post-Civil War to 1965, there were about 4,700 lynchings, 1,200 of whites. So about altogether in that 100-year period of time, there were about 3,500 lynchings of blacks in the United States, and I would assume those are the only ones that matter in you know, in the modern collective psyche, the way people look at it. So that comes to about 35 people put to year. I would argue most of those people were likely guilty of those crimes and would have very likely been found guilty and hung on a later date. Remember, lynching is just an extra judicial form of capital punishment. Often the people, if they went through the legal system, especially in the old days, they would have been found guilty and hung anyway. So to me, it's not the biggest issue, nor should it be made into a talking point. But since Tom likes to bring up the things that the Democrats have done wrongly in the past. Let me selectively pick out some points just to undermine his narrative a bit, because we need to remember President Lincoln and his totally botching of things to cause the Civil War, the deadliest conflict ever. Remember, he was a Republican. Remember, after the war, he was the one, and Ulysses S. Grant also, who sent in carpetbaggers and the Reconstruction and basically tyranny in the South, okay, post-Civil War. Also, it was the Republican McKinley who, without congressional approval, waged war in the Philippines. That was a Republican McKinley-Roosevelt thing. Okay, this was Republican. You should remember the Iraq War 1 and 2 were Republican. NAFTA was Republican majority. 9/11 happened under a Republican-dominated government under George Bush Jr. Also, here's one for Tom. You might like this, Tom, because I know Tom hates the Immigration Act of 1965. Well, the fact of the matter is, when it comes to the summation of all the total in voting for that act, which caused the demographic change in the United States, that bill was passed by 74% of the Democrats voting for it and 85% of the Republicans voting for the passage of that bill. And interestingly enough, most of the no votes, Tom, that were against the Immigration Act of 1965 were Democrats from the South. Okay? So the fact of the matter is there's plenty of blood on both hands when it comes to running this country into the ground from both parties.
Mm-hmm.
Also remember that he is right in one sense. The modern Democrats of today are nothing like the Democrats of the 60s. They've totally gone. What?
I said true.
Yeah, absolutely. They've gone totally off the rails into crazy land. And on that, I'm sympathetic with. And also I'd like to say, but however, we have to remember that sometimes a broken clock is right twice a day. And occasionally the Democrats, because of whatever political machinations or whatever logic led them to enact a certain policy, it seems that they will stumble upon a decent policy here and there. I'm for environmentalism. I'm for trade protectionism. And often Democrats like Charles Schumer out of New York votes for some of those things. And so, I basically am just critical of Tom's, in a sense, use of what I consider Republican talking points. And I think we need to take a little deeper look at what his agenda or the narrative that he's putting out. And remember, these Republicans, they've run the country into the ground, as I've listed in my call. And on that note, Michael, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the phone call. And you're absolutely right. I mean, there's plenty of guilt on both parties. And it's one of the reasons why I think we should abandon the two-party system and go back to what the nation started with, which was anybody can form a party and run for office, that we didn't have to be one of these two existing parties that are just steeped in all this corruption. All right. Thank you for the phone call, Paul. We're going to switch over to Terrell in South Carolina. Hello, Terrell. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, what's going on? Just wanted to point out that Tom just got a barrage just now, man. That was a lot. No one had time, and not really Adam, but just, and I feel where it was calling from, and we all have our opinions, and that's what makes us unique and special. But I called about the the first story about the father who was going to his car. I don't know if this just happened recently. I don't know. I'm getting bits and pieces. He had his kids in the car. I guess the police were trying to talk to him or trying to do something, and he went to his car, I guess, and so he broke up a fight. And then the cops were there. They didn't know what was going on. As he went to his car, I was told he was shot in the back.
Yes.
Multiple times, and is in ICU.
Yes.
I want to know your take on that. Please.
Well, again, when we've seen these in the past, there'll be information that comes out after the fact. But apparently there was the police were called over a domestic dispute. This gentleman tried to stop the fight. It turned out that he had a warrant out on him, so the police tried to stop him. He tried to get back into his car with his kids in the back seat, and they tasered him. That didn't work, and then they shot him apparently 7 times. And he is in the hospital. He's still alive, and it's triggered all kinds of rioting across that part of Wisconsin.
So I am that a taser doesn't work. I mean, if I get a paper cut, I'm incapacitated. So how are tasers just not working? But at any rate, yeah, that did trigger some stuff. What about the guy with the knife in the convenience store? Even though he did have a weapon, that was a lot of shooting.
Yeah, it was, and that seems to kind of be a hallmark that the police will sort of unload their guns at a suspect. Of course, you know, from their point of view, they may be dealing with somebody who's on fentanyl or angel dust and just isn't going to feel the bullets.
Good point. So I think 6 people armed with some basic karate could probably take down a fentanyl dude, but I don't know because of the, drugs. And yeah, sometimes gunshots are warranted, but I'm looking for the gun in these scenarios, in these situations. I'm not seeing any guns or swords or battle axes. It's just bullets and lots of bullets. So I just wanted to get your take on that. And you're right. Information will come out. He probably had a bazooka in his trunk with the kids holding it around. Who knows? But that's just how this thing works. And I'm noticing it. And like, I just started watching. I started to refresh myself with Young and his interactions with Floyd, just to make sure that I'm still on the same page. And yep, this is a poopy show. Thank you very much, Mike. I love your show. I love you. Love you, Lady Claire. You guys take care, and thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Mark in New York. Hello, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Happy Monday to you.
Happy Monday.
To call and just talk. Thank you. I wanted to call about some of the stuff I saw over the weekend, specifically related to the GAO and how Jake Tapper was talking to this Chad Wolf guy. And but I will respond a little bit to what Dustin was saying, that Bannon, he's made millions off of Gold Sachs when he was working there, Hollywood movies. He's got a piece of Seinfeld. He did work for Breitbart. So he's got tons of money. And when I'm comparing 27 million, it doesn't seem like a lot, like something that he would risk. Bannon would risk a high profile. I think maybe he was brought in. If he was in on this nickel, to me, guy with his kind of money, that's a nickel diamond, because there's like a half a dozen guys, if not a dozen guys, that are mentioned in this thing. And I just don't see him seeing the advantage of making a quick million here, a quick million there with this with the exposure that he has. And I've listened to him on many YouTube videos, and he says a lot of he speaks off the cuff, and a lot of what he says resonates, and I just think he's more of an honest guy than the media lets on. But I could be wrong, because he is part of the corporate making money skimming off of whatever he does. But he's a mover and a shaker, and he's made a lot of money. He doesn't have to nickel and dime a border wall with a half a dozen other guys. It's too much exposure. I don't think he's smarter than that. But anyway, getting back to fake Tapper, I just noticed after I see him and I'm able to TiVo him and see this whole string of, like, for the last few weeks, seeing these Sunday morning shows on the recording them, I see that it's almost like he stacks. It's almost, and the funny part of it, it's like a Don Adams and Get Smart routine where he's like, would you believe one guy said Trump
Dave, I got to put you on hold. Don't hang up. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go back to Mark in New York. And Mark, if you could pick up where you left off.
Yeah, with fake Tapper, he was again, I call it round robin stacking, where he says, Trump sucks, what do you think? What says you? And I can't get political like that. Then he starts name dropping John Kelly, Elaine Duke, Kirsten Nielsen. They say Trump sucks. What say you? No, I can't get political. And then he says, well, what? And then he starts talking about Republican voters against Trump, with Miles Taylor. It all began with Miles Taylor, who's a chief of staff. Well, no, not exactly. I understand he worked for underneath Kirstjen Nielsen at the DHS. So he wasn't like the White House chief of staff. He was like the secretary to Kirstjen Nielsen, or, a manager underneath. And anyway, so Miles Taylor comes out, and then I looked in, well, what is this Republican voters against Trump? And lo and behold, it's Bill Kristol, Mike Murphy, a Bushy, Sarah Longwell. I didn't get a chance to look into, but some articles said Jeb Bush is in on them too, along with, and it's connected with the Lincoln Group, which is this Conway thing, which I feel so bad about Conway leaving because of her kids and all this stuff. It's crazy. But then he brings up the Wolf, says, well, the GAO says you shouldn't even have your job. It's illegal what you guys did. And then I looked it up, and I just see that, that they're quoting some law that says you got to hire from within. And it was the Democrats in the DHS that contacted the GAO, Government Accountability Office, that's run by an Obama appointee that's been working for the GAO since 1973. Now that's deep state. That's deep state bureaucracy right there.
Mm-hmm.
I was barely a couple of years old in 1973, and he's been there the whole time. Now I stumbled on today, and this is my last point. American Thinker, right there it was hard to find any articles. They bring up this point that they always complain about the Republicans, like when Pelosi came out. What about this 17 million with 270 claims about sexual misconduct in the Congress? They believe it's probably a lot more than that. Or the Justice Department concluded with government agencies with tax and protecting Hillary against targeting Trump. Never complained about that. And Obama was spending money for slush funds and kickbacks. Supposedly this Hatch Act violation, executive branch with political activities. They overlooked that. Apparently Obama was taking money and withholding money from Congress. They never complained about that. And they never complained about IRS spying on Obama opponents. And there's a lot of more stuff that you could go back, and I hear Paul saying Democrats did this, and the same thing with the Republicans. To me, they're all kind of in the same boat. And
I agree.
That's about it. That's all I wanted to say. This GAO, it's again deep state stuff, and it's run by a guy that's been there for decades. I can't imagine that. I've had like 3 career changes, maybe more.
Yeah, same here. Anyway, Mark, I got to let you go. We're at the end of the show. My apologies to the callers waiting online. Please call back tomorrow. And stay tuned for John Stedmiller and Steve Elkins. They're going to have a lot of interesting things to share with you. Please spread the word of RBN, spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. We need your help to stay on the air doing what we're doing. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.